Welcome back to another episode of Inside Multifamily Access Control. And as always, Colin's with me. Colin, how you doing?
Doing well. Hello, everybody. Happy to be here again.
Absolutely. It's a Monday. So we record this on Mondays. So we always catch up first before we do this about how the weekend's going. So this goes out, though, on a Thursday. So a couple days till we get there. But we thought what we do today, we seem to always bring on other people to have a conversation. But actually, one of the largest influencers, I would say, one of the largest suppliers, one of the largest people that impact the business is Salto themselves. So it makes, I think, perfect sense that we have a conversation with Salto. And since Colin, you're here and you're with Salto.
Yes. Let's do it.
Let's do this. Good. So I think it's, but no, let's, if you don't mind, I think it'd be great. Give me a little bit of background and tell the story, if you would, about Salto. People know them as sort of a European-based company that makes really good-looking stuff and the rest. But why don't you tell the story from your point of view of what you know, and we'll go from there into the impacts into multifamily that you're seeing in the business. But let's start with a little bit of background. Tell me a little bit about Salto, where they come from, and sort of the heritage.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, we're headquartered in Spain. San Sebastian, Spain is where our global headquarters are. We're known for a really good looking lock, and we make a really nice electronic lock. But I think the coolest part that I think of our history is really where we come from as it relates to the data on card and our Salto virtual network and some of that sort of stuff. So the heritage of Salto really dates back to kind of late 90s with hotel credentials. And a lot of our founders come from that credential piecing or piece of the hotel industry and thought we could do it better. And so that's really where this stems from, is this idea of putting data onto a credential and really leveraging that credential as the database. And so that's where Salto's heritage comes from. And from there, we've obviously designed and built some really nice looking locks and created a locking solution to leverage that data on card capability and really change some ideas and concepts as it relates to access control along the way.
So with that, though, just for those that aren't as familiar, so you may sometimes hear it called like sneaker net or whatever it might be, right? Like the idea that the lock didn't get updated until you utilized the card that existed. So the programming was done that way, correct?
Correct. Yep.
And so they had that technology, the founders, and they were leveraging it on third-party locks before they started their own, or?
No. So they had this idea and this concept and kind of brought it to the attention of others. And from my understanding, that it didn't strike a chord with the folks they were working with. And so they separated and started their own company.
Gotcha. Okay. So the concept and idea they had, they germinated that. It wasn't adopted by others. So they went and they created their own product. Right. So somewhat of a classic sort of entrepreneurial story of innovation finds market and maybe not as receptive. So they go and they create their own on that end. Okay. So continue on then. So once they do that, where do they start to focus? Where do they start seeing success? And then how's the growth happen?
Yeah. So, at the beginning, it was kind of targeted to be more of a commercial application, maybe not in the hospitality market. Obviously, being in Spain, everything started more in the European continent area or European market. With that, though, the multifamily and hospitality started to ask for it, and so kind of drifted back into that market, and that's really where the growth started, was back in the hospitality arena. Came to the U.S. around 2005, 2006, and continued that growth here. Again, the residential kind of high-end A+ multifamily market and the hospitality really spurred the growth. but today we are in a lot of different verticals, still leading with hospitality and multifamily. Uh, but education is now up there. We're a really good solution for kind of the campus application in both higher ed and K through 12. The wireless locks provide functionality and flexibility that some other access control solutions can't. We've partnered with some other really good access control solutions to further their capabilities, so that helps spur the growth. Um, and now today we're at a point where we've brought on KS, which gets us into the cloud world. We've identified some different avenues that require some of our capabilities. And we're also now really starting to identify some vertical specialty things. What do we need to do that is specific to multifamily? What do we need to do that is specific to education? Where in the past we've been able to kind of leverage our capabilities to attack those markets with what we had, and now we can really focus some efforts in some of those various areas.
Yeah, the verticalization definitely a trend that we're seeing across. So, when it comes to the multi-family, let me take a step back. So, with like every company, there's sort of that core product that they have that they build an organization sort of around and go through. So, with the core product that you have, if you would, is it's the architectural lock, if you would, from a hoteling the hospitality type marketplace that then has services built around the KS side. Am I safe to assume that germinated from Clay, right?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So Clay's a name that now on was that a third party product that was acquired and then turned into it? Like, what was the story behind that? Because that's really the way I look at it. If you would, from outside, if you would in, is like that's where the software came from in a lot of cases. Outside from a not an embedded side,
Yeah.
but from like having your own cloud stack and some of the expertise came from there. Or so correct me.
No, I think that's accurate to a degree, right? Our space platform, which is our core software and kind of the original software that came from Pro Access and is now deployed as space, um, has a lot of features and functionality, and we've long thought of ourselves as a locking solution, not just a lock. However, in about 2014, we recognized the cloud piece and identified Clay as a real solution and an opportunity to move into that cloud space. And so we made an initial investment in Clay. Over the next few years, kind of slowly migrated them into the Salto family. In 2017, fully launched Salto KS. And as of this year, basically moved everything from Clay into Salto KS. And they're a whole part of our organization. What's interesting there, and I think this is really what we're working towards, is trying to develop a locking platform, right? A hardware set that is adaptable to both the space platform and the KS platform, so that we can deliver the physical needs across either one of those platforms and allow the end users to dictate, hey, I need this functionality from the cloud, or I need this functionality from the SVN world, but not limit them hardware wise to deliver that functionality.
I got you. Okay, so some more of the flexibility behind the systems instead of sort of like monolithic, if you would, on that approach. That makes total sense. So now we go to specific to the multifamily space, and as you've been verticalizing there, some of the key observations, I guess, if you were to look at the evolution of where you were from there to where you're at today, and then I guess if you could give a little bit of sort of the vision side of what you have, can you talk about the progression? The reason why I think it's important is a lot of times our customer base, they get, based off of how your interactions happen with you initially is sort of the vision that people have of sort of who you are in a lot of cases, right? Because they don't spend as much time in it as you do. Maybe they don't spend as much time as I do of observing it and trying to understand it, right? So help where you've been to where you're going in multifamily.
As it relates to multifamily specifically, we've over the past few years we've released some hardware that was specific to this market. Our Element and our Element Fusion lines were designed for this market, for multifamily and hospitality specifically, to give some aesthetics as well as functionality that we thought the market was asking for. And so I think that was kind of the first real specialization, I would say. Our XS4 lock is our most common lock. It's our workhorse. We found applications for our XS4 in pretty much any market or vertical you can think of. But that Fusion and Element was that first, hey, we can specialize and really deliver something special on the hardware side. And then through functionality releases in KS, like our pods solution and some of the stuff we're doing in space as it relates to integrations and partnerships and stuff, we're really recognizing that our expertise in both software development as well as hardware and application can really start to elevate if we specialize and deliver some hardware that is designed specifically for certain applications. Now, we may design something for a certain application and it spreads slightly, but really that focus on design into this is the application that needs it. Let's design it for this. And if we find other use cases, that's fantastic. So we've also identified some need to maybe add some additional understanding and knowledge about other use cases within the residential space. So we acquired Dynalock at the beginning of this year, which is a Z-Wave smart deadbolt, which gives us some both knowledge on that Z-Wave kind of traditional smart home space, as well as a different form factor, and provides a different type of lock, again, targeted into that residential, that specialization into this market. So I think one of the things that we've recognized is the kind of the consumerization of multifamily, right? We're no longer just selling to another business. We're also selling to that resident. We're selling to that true end user. And they need to be part of our design and part of our thought process. And so we're really focused on that as we move forward, of how do we continue to deliver safety and security and return on investment for that property owner, that property manager, that developer, but also delivering that experience that resident is demanding.
Yeah, no, that's the consumerization side. I think has a heavy influence. It's funny too. It's sort of, in the commercial end of our business, the end user, I think I've said this a million times, but I'll say it, I'll continue to. It's one of my favorite talk tracks, but we've never really had to worry about the end user. But on the consumer side, they've had to, because that's who the customer is. So being aware of what they need, what they want, and the influence, I would say they didn't have as much influence as they do currently now. And it is driven a lot by that resident's home, of how it interacts with the other stuff. It's funny, our products, they sit on the outside of the door, so it's like had this weird relationship with the inside of the house, and the use cases are very, very different on that side. So speaking of that, as you go into the whole home side, and we're starting to see, I would say there's always been a strong ecosystem in our industry, but it was more seen as integration partners than it was necessarily an ecosystem, right? It's like, Salto, you made that lock, that's behind you. How many of these do you want? And here's how you integrate with it. And then you went to market. And that was sort of seen as, it's almost like a distribution channel more than it was a business building channel. So talk to me a little bit about how you approach ecosystems. What makes a good ecosystem partner, not only from an expectation that you have of them, but then what they can expect of you. And then if you could speak a little bit more to what do you think the ecosystem is going to look like? Because it's in flux right now, I think, at best. And it's, these ecosystem partners could overnight become competitors, and maybe that is how it ends up, right? And that's okay.
Yeah.
But it's changing. So what are your views on ecosystem, good, bad, and then how do you think it's going to end up?
Yeah. So
Before I get to that, I think just piggybacking on what you had mentioned of, the integration piece, right? Uh, to deliver the ecosystem in the past, we put so much responsibility on installation partners and kind of the security integrator, right? They bought this product, they bought that product, and they had to make it work. Um, in today's world, I think we can make it a lot easier on them and empower them by having really good ecosystem partners at kind of the manufacturing level. And I say manufacturing, uh, including the software developers in as the manufacturer, right? The product owner, I guess, maybe the better term. Um, but it's critical because we need that security integrator or software integrator or whatever you want to call them, to deliver a really good solution. And the best way to do that is to ensure that the 2 products or 3 products or 4 products that they're bringing together have an existing relationship and have either proven this out or are working towards the same goal and have the same thought process and want to deliver that end product. So kind of the way we approach it is we try to be very clear on what our goals and our aspirations are today, right? Obviously where we go in 3, 5, 10 years may be different, and we can't really work that necessary. I mean, it's got to be part of the conversation, but we've got to deliver today, and we need to be cautious of who's a competitor and who's a partner, and so we spend a lot of time working on that. And I think there's some crossover there, certainly, where maybe partners and competitors sell a similar product, but the primary core product is different. And it's about being crystal clear on that and having good conversations and honest conversations with those partners. Hey, if there's crossover, let's talk about it now. It's a heck of a lot easier to overcome that obstacle now than it is after you deploy something and realize that you've sold the same solution or a portion of it after the fact. So for us, it's about the end user experience and how do we deliver that with these partners? How do we make sure that the integration or the installation partner that's going to deploy it is trained, certified, whatever that needs to be, so that they can help us deliver that end product. And then the partnership is healthy. We both have the same end goal. We know what we're getting out of it. Is our product going to be kind of the face? Is their product going to be the face? What is that going to look like? And have those conversations up front. What the ecosystem is going to look like in multifamily is I think maybe one of the most fun conversations to have right now. And it is in flux. Where we sit, what can we deliver, is always changing, so there's, if you peel it back from just an access control standpoint and you talk about the ecosystem, kind of who I think is involved in that. You obviously have the resident, you have the property manager, the developer, the owner. You may have a general contractor in there if it's a new build. The security integrator piece is in there. And then you have the actual locking solution. You have door hardware. You have kind of IoT, right? The in-unit IoT. You have the amenity spaces, the community involvement stuff. You've got the payment solutions or property management solutions. You've got building management solutions now coming into the fold. And so that kind of that first level of technology partners, right? That's just the first level of access control. We're not into connectivity and all of that and CRMs and getting people to rent. Those are technologies that are in the multifamily space that maybe aren't directly impacting the access control and that first layer. In there, you've got to find what's going to be the primary interaction point, right? And I think that's the piece that is really up in the air right now, I would say. What is that one app that the resident is going to interact? Is that going to be the same app that the property management team is always going to interact with? Is there going to be two different apps? Does everybody want an app? I guess is also a question, you know. And so from my standpoint, we need to understand that ecosystem. We need to understand where we fit in that ecosystem. You know, we deliver a really solid software solution that our app could be the primary in some cases, but not in every case. So how do we make sure that we establish ourselves as a brand and as a viable option, but also as a supporting piece too, when we need to be, when there's a demand or a requirement for, you know, a property manager says, hey, this is our differentiator and it works the best in this application. Great. How do we work with that application to deliver the Salto experience via that partner? And so it's not an easy process. It's a process that takes time, making sure that we're partnering with the right people, make sure that we know where they think they fit in that ecosystem, and then being able to adapt because that ecosystem changes and each application changes. So it's an interesting piece.
It is. It's very murky in a lot of ways, and you know, I think in a world where people like to have a lot of clarity, and if you take the approach of thinking that people also don't like to have as much choice, right now there's a lot of choice on that, and I can't decide whether that's good or it's bad. People like to believe that, yeah, the more choice the better because the customer wants it, but you know, there's also the conventional wisdom that what people don't want actually is a lot of choice, right?
Well, and I mean, we've talked about this on a number of our past conversations at various points, right? Like, you know, Ben Brickta talked about data and the data that they want to collect. Well, that's a want and a need. And you talk about getting rid of the keys, and that's a want and a need. And what it boils down to is choice is great if everybody's educated, right? And so I think the challenge really becomes communicating those choices and educating on those choices and what they really get. You know, it's really hard to deliver the one-stop solution that solves it all unless somebody's willing to pay an absurd amount of money. And so how do we educate? How do we ensure that the partners having the conversations or whoever's kind of leading that dialogue understands the whys of the end user and of the property owner and what they are really trying to accomplish? Because otherwise, otherwise choice doesn't matter if we're not educated and we understand why we're trying to accomplish something, then too much choice is a bad thing. So
no, I agree. And that's 100%. I'm just curious to see, you know, currently right now it's sort of a grab bag of whoever gets there first seems to be the lead on that, right? And ultimately it's going to come down to, I believe, the buyer makes the determination of who leads and who follows in a lot of these cases, right? And I just wonder at some point the condensing the options that are out in the marketplace based off of what's the main driver. It's hard right now to see what's the main driver.
Well, but I think that's I guess that's kind of what I was alluding to, is that main driver changes from management company to management company and even project to project, right? The main driver in a downtown project may be different than the main driver in a suburban project. And is the solution that was deployed in downtown the right solution to deploy in suburban, in suburbia? And how do you, as a portfolio owner, how do you make that decision? How do you try to standardize, but then also deliver the right solution in each one of those spaces? And right now, I think that is a challenge.
Yeah, see, that's why I think is the practical way that I try to approach it, though. If you look at the core parts of what are needed, like you have to haves, right? And you do somewhat of a Venn diagram off of those of how they overlap. and then you were to lay over who can do those things, you start to see some similarities.
Mhm.
Now, as you get into those different circles that are there, you can then start to differentiate, well, do they have brass or
Yeah.
silver, right? Like, and
Yeah.
do that
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I see where you're going. And yes, I mean, that's what you're talking about there is exactly what we're trying to do, right? From a hardware perspective, certainly is, do we have the solution that if it's deployed in this application here, we can do it in this manner. And if it's deployed here, we can do it in that manner. And so, yes, I see exactly what you're talking about, of kind of that core functionality and then being able to deploy it in those various applications.
Well, and then also be able to ebb and flow with,
Yeah.
like, because historically within our space, the lock companies in a lot of ways, they led.
Mm-hmm.
Then I would say you started to see the access control software companies get involved, and in some cases they led. It's like the whole Section 8, Section 28, right? That
Yep.
it was
Yeah.
led by a lot of that, right?
Yep.
And then now you had companies, a lot of my opinion was, that had vision of what a connected home or connected apartment would look like, but then when it boiled it down, they were access control software companies that happened to have vision of doing other things, started to lead in some of those conversations. And then now you put on top of that what I would call more the building management type systems, incorporating also pay into that, like the property management systems. They're now getting involved, and we continue to go up the food chain, if you would, of where I do believe it's starting to get a little bit simpler now. Oversimplifying that, because as you go down, let's say from class A to class B, class C, you may not see those types, those players that are in class A are not necessarily in class B, right? So again, the sort of Venn diagram of things that you have to have, you're going to have locks.
Mm-hmm.
Whether they lead or they follow, in my opinion, is actually the main, the sort of that point they get to where you either go left or you go right, right? In a lot of those cases on the decision making tree.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective, we have to be accommodating both of those options, right? We want to continue to build really nice looking, really functional locks that hopefully do drive the conversation in some occasions. But we also have to be realists in that they may not drive every conversation. And so how do we make sure that we're partnered with folks when the lock isn't the one driving, or developing software that the software can be it? Because I see what you're saying of it's going to split, but I don't think it's ever going to fully go away where locking is always going to be the afterthought, right? I do think that there are still times when we need to be prepared to lead with, this is the best locking solution for this application.
Yeah, no, I do. To me, it's the difference between running a 400-meter sprint versus the 400-meter relay,
Yeah.
where I do believe at different sections of that race, you hand the baton off.
Yep.
And those that could be really good at their core competency, that's that 100-meter maybe part of what they do. Then they hand it off to the other one that takes it the other 100. Then they hand it off to the other 100. Like, and you look at it where historically, I think all these different disparate parts that went into multifamily, it was individual 400-meter races that you hoped made up the Olympics, I guess. I don't know. I'm like totally, expanding this analogy, but that's in my head, at least. That's the way I look at it, is to basically say that those that can run their part the best, but then hand off to others that can take it from there, are the ones that are going to win.
Absolutely. And I would say, kind of piggybacking on your analogy, I do think in the future that there may be times to try, we're certainly not going to just settle, right, and say, hey, this is what we do. If there's a new feature or new function that comes along, we need to look honestly and say, hey, can we do that? Can we accomplish that and build it into our solution? And then we want our partners kind of doing that same thing, to the point where maybe we can get to the point where we're running a 3-person relay instead of a 4-person relay race, right? Because I do think there is also advantages to not
100% agree.
not requiring 10 people to deliver. I don't want to have 10 partners every single time to deliver that solution, right? So we've got to build on those core competencies also in order to improve and grow.
Yeah, it's just hard, I think, to, there's this great desire, I believe, and I understand why, for predictability in the business, whether you're a customer or you're someone supplying, and not knowing if you are running 4 legs of a, of a relay or 2 in this case, sort of, it makes it hard to get predictability in the business.
And I think, we run into that also, right? Of if, I don't know how to tie it into the relay analogy, right? But let's say
you don't have to.
let's say a coach picks their 4 legs blind, right? That baton doesn't get handed off smoothly versus a coach picking 4 legs of partners who have all worked together. That baton handoff becomes so much smoother.
Yep.
And so I think when kind of going back to that question you asked about how do you work with partners, how do you build that ecosystem?
Yep.
If the integrator or the security integrator is that coach, we want them to have confidence that we've talked with all of those partners. We know how that relay is going to be run versus putting that all on them of saying, hey, I want that one, that one, that one, and that one.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of correlations. Actually, to continue on with the running analogy, it reminds me now, I run a race called Hood to Coast every year in Oregon, where you go from Mount Hood out to the coast of Oregon. And it's a 12-person relay. I don't remember how many miles it is, but it's a lot. You basically anywhere between 22 to 30 hours, depending on how good a shape you're in that case.
So you're closer to the 22, right? You're always closer to the 22.
We were like 5-6 years ago. That was our constant. Trust me, it wasn't because of me. I was definitely pulling the caboose of this train. But no, the preparation and that it was one of those cases, because every once in a while someone hurt themselves, twist an ankle, someone wasn't feeling good, and someone had to jump in and get it. And if we had to pull somebody off the street randomly to go do that, it'd be a mess. But the fact that we all worked together, we knew, we had plans, the rest, and we kind of went through that process and made it a lot easier. So it does. But it's interesting to me, though, that question of, if I look at the multifamily space, where right now, historically, it's been, let's call it a 10-leg race, right? Where you're starting to see the condensing of those legs, and it's going to probably bottom out at a case where I don't think it's going to be a one, it's not going to be 1 leg, but it will flex between 4 legs to 2 legs, depending on the customer, the project, incentives, like what do they need, what they want, like all that stuff. So having that flexibility to be able to do that, and moving away from the old power structure of it has to be 10 legs in order for this to work, and this is how we do it, are the ones that are going to win. And what I like to bring it back to sort of the Salto end of what you're talking about is, you're thinking about that, you're working on that, you're involved in that, you're shaping that, all that stuff. So it comes back to good partnership, picking the right partner that can flex with you when it needs to. Very interesting. All right, well, this has been, at least for me, it's been great to hear, because it's like we do this every single week, and we don't necessarily spend as much time with each other on this stuff. We talk about everything else going on around us. That it's good to touch base with one of the leaders in the space on this, of what you're seeing and what you're doing too, to give that perspective across to customers, because you're knee deep in it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot of fun and always learning. That's one of the reasons I like to bring people onto this, because there's, as we just talked about, right? We have to be ready to adapt. We have to be flexible. We have to be learning and understanding, because right now there's a lot of change as it relates to where does access control fit into the multifamily ecosystem.
100%. I think that's a good place to stop right there with that question. So, all right, Colin, as always, I really, really appreciate it. So thank you. And we'll catch up again next week.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Thank you.